Today I'm telling a story I want everyone to hear. It belongs to my dad, Michael, who's just turned 82. And if you've been following our Rebuilding Mum and Dad series, you'll know that both my parents have made incredible progress with their strength and life quality after starting to train with weights back in January 2025. And to mark my dad's 82nd birthday, I want to focus on what we can learn from him, because while his story is now one of impressive strength for his age, deadlifting over 97 kilos, around 215 pounds, and climbing, just 3 years ago, he feared he was facing a very different future, which he'll share with you today. And my dad's story matters so much because newly released statistics gathered here in the UK, but that apply much more widely, suggest many of us could spend the last 15 to 20 years of our lives in poor health, living longer but weaker, more dependent lives, becoming increasingly limited in what we can do. And the uncomfortable truth is, most of us don't really think about that until it's too late. So let's hear what is possible when you decide that age will not define you, and instead, you define how you age. Well, my dad has never been someone who thought of himself as particularly athletic. He's told us before how he wasn't the one picked for the teams at school. So Dad didn't grow up thinking of himself as being strong in the traditional sense. But what he did do over decades was live in a way that has set him up to enjoy a high quality of life in his 80s. And that's what we're going to be exploring today. He's lived an active life where, unless working, he wouldn't spend long periods sitting down. Instead, after work, he'd be doing DIY or gardening or making things. How many of us today, including me, find ourselves sitting watching TV in the evenings and scrolling on our phones? It's just so easily done. Both my parents also cook really well, and they always made meals from scratch pretty much every single day. And perhaps more importantly, my dad has what I would describe as a deeply ingrained can-do mindset. There's never really been an expectation in his mind that age should be a barrier. And what we're seeing today didn't start in his 80s. It's the result of how he's lived his entire life. What he has added in his 80s, and we all wish we'd started earlier, is strength training to build that all-important muscle and bone. But my dad's journey to this point hasn't always been smooth. Before we started strength training, he had come through a period that really shook him. In 2023, he had a hernia operation, and unfortunately, there were complications with his recovery, which meant my dad ended up using a catheter for several months, leaving him less active and worried about his future. I want to take you back to your operation in November of 2023 when you had the hernia operation. Over that time, I saw a change in you because you came really a little bit depressed about it. You wouldn't have been classified as depressed, but it got you down. And I could tell that you were beginning to worry about what your future looked like.
I mean, to put it mildly, you begin to worry about your future. Will you ever come off this thing? And to make things worse, I was having a lot of problems with the catheters.
Yes, it was miserable.
Life was quite restricted to where you could go, how long you could go out for.
It was frequent bathroom breaks.
Frequent breaks. And so again, and that went on for months. Therefore, you begin to think, I'm 80 next year. You know, is this just what life's going to be like? Because you can look around you and many people are doing that. But for me, who had been very fit up to then, I'd had no illness of any significance in my life. It was a big turn of events and was worrying.
Because you were less active over that time because you were more restricted, especially when you were wearing the catheter. You just became a little less robust, and you could see that worry was there. You were thinking potentially, is age catching up with me here?
Yes.
Yes, you could never have imagined at that stage, 2 years later, people would be calling you a beast on the internet.
No.
For the enormous lifts that you're able to do. So to very quickly recap for those of you who are new to this story, in January 2025, my parents and I began weight training using a barbell to reverse muscle loss in order to preserve our mobility, independence, and long-term health as we age. Just 1 year later, in our January 2026 episode, viewers saw firsthand the incredible transformation as my mum, Rhoda, changed from someone who, due to muscle loss, had been unable to walk unsupported for more than 30 seconds, yet just 1 year on was able to walk at speed without any help for over 6 minutes, and she's since pushed that up to nearer 10 minutes, as we saw in our March episode. And as we've heard, my dad has gone from someone who'd been beginning to question the future to now being a high-performing lifter for his age. We live in Scotland, but my parents are coached online by Reis, a doctor of physical therapy and head coach with Starting Strength Cincinnati. And Starting Strength gyms are supporting our journey as a series sponsor of Rebuilding Mum and Dad, helping us bring you these regular updates. We chose Starting Strength because their approach centres on progressive loading with a barbell, working multiple muscle groups at once, which is one of the most efficient and effective ways to build muscle and increase bone density, as my mum has. Using a barbell and rack plus a mixture of heavier and micro weights meant we could start light and add load very gradually and carefully, sometimes only a kilo or a couple of pounds or even less each week. And this has been key to rebuilding fast and safely. Starting Strength gyms have locations across the US and offer online coaching anywhere in the world. If you want to get stronger or help your parents get stronger, you'll find a link in the description to information on how to get started. So though my dad's very first deadlift was 30 kilos, by adding weight to the bar slowly but gradually, he's reached the point where he is deadlifting weights just under 100 kilos. And his coach is constantly adjusting my dad's training schedule to meet his changing strength and condition. Whereas a few months ago, he might have been doing a couple of repetitions at his top weight on the deadlift. Today, as he reaches those upper limits of 97, 98 kilos, he does just a single lift at the top, but will do multiple repetitions at lighter weights. His top weight on the squat is 54.5 kilos, around 120 pounds. On his bench press, it's 51.5 kilos, 114 pounds. And he's dropped down on his overhead press to work on his form there, with his top weight around 28 kilos, 62 pounds. But it's what those moving numbers mean for my dad in terms of life quality that really matters. He moves with ease and confidence, he walks faster, he takes on physical tasks without hesitation, and he feels capable again, as he shares here.
The biggest benefit I see in my life is, even probably before I had the hernia, I had an awareness that I wasn't walking as fast as I used to do unless I put the pressure on. And then if I walked quickly up a hill, I wasn't desperately out of breath, but I was declining. One of the big surprise to me is just that I now walk as quickly as I've ever walked. I've timed myself over distances and I know that I'm walking like, 30, 40 years ago. So I now lift these things and I'm looking at will I be able to get this one up?
Yeah.
But I'm not thinking, what'll go wrong in the meantime.
Working very close to his maximum weights, my dad inches forward by sometimes taking a few steps down in weight only to work his way back up to a slightly greater amount, as he has with the deadlift. So before Christmas, his maximum was 94 kilos, 207 pounds. Then he stepped back and has worked his way up to confidently lifting 97 kilos, and he's now working on doing the same with 98 kilos. And for those interested in where my dad's training goes from here and how you can progress in your 80s when you're very close to your genetic potential, here's Coach Reis explaining how he intends to adapt the weekly sessions going forward.
The goal is, reset things like we did earlier this year, kind of right around the beginning of the year. Reset, work our way back up, with the goal, of course, being to hit another peak beyond the previous one, right? So we've gotten even stronger than last time. And then, of course, demonstrate that with a new 1 rep max. You're going to do the same thing again. We're going to reset. Now, what typically ends up happening, and what I foresee is a change, especially for your dad, rather than both squatting and deadlifting heavy in the same week, we're going to split those up. So 1 week would be a heavy squat. The deadlift would not be heavy that week. You're still going to do it, but it's going to be a little bit more moderate weight. And then the following week, they would switch. The squat becomes more moderate. The deadlift is heavy. So as those two are the primary stressors in the program, right? The presses are hard, the benches are hard, but the absolute load is not as heavy and not as stressful for your system. So those are the two. The squat and deadlift are the ones we have to really kind of watch and pay attention to and start to spread out as you get stronger and as this process carries on. So the stronger you get, the more stress you're able to apply to yourself because you can lift heavier. And therefore your recovery should be a little bit longer and has to be a little bit longer as you move forward. So we spread those two lifts out. Now in week 1, you've only got, as far as a major systemic stressor, you've only got the squat. And so your body can recover and adapt to that the following week. You come in, you do a deadlift. That's the only thing you've got to focus on that week. That's the only major stressor your body has to recover from. And so you do the same thing like we talked about. You reset. It's every other week now. And then the goal again is as you build up, you eventually surpass what you did on this kind of cycle or block, if you will. The resets become a little bit more frequent, and the build up to a new level just takes a little bit longer and is a little more drawn out. And it starts to become a little bit less predictable that you will actually build up to a new max without having to reset again. The analogy that I use I think is really useful is like you're climbing a mountain, and the closer you get to the top, the steeper it gets. And if you slip, the farther back you slide. So when you start up the mountain, it's very gradual. The slope is gentle. You slip, you stumble. You really don't go backwards all that much. You keep on trucking and you can make decent progress. And the farther up you go, steeper the hill gets. Any kind of a slip, stumble, interruption in that progress, you slide back a little farther. And so this is the same for lifters as they train, as they get stronger. And you've been at this now for over a year. All the details as far as your recovery, your nutrition, your sleep, all these pieces are going to matter more and more. The point is, like, if you take a vacation, it's going to interrupt training more now than it maybe would have a year ago. And again, that's just the nature of you're much, much stronger now. In order to get even stronger, it takes that much more effort and that much more attention to, again, all the details with regard to recovery and all the things outside the gym. Again, the resets become maybe a bit more frequent, and the likelihood that you will end with a new max becomes, again, a bit less predictable the farther along you get.
Ultimately, my parents' weight training journey isn't just about chasing personal best for the sake of it. It's about maintaining independence and protecting the ability to live life on their own terms. Because when you look at the statistics again, the idea that many people are spending the last 2 decades of their lives in poor health, what you're talking about is a loss of mobility, of confidence, and of freedom, and of life quality. And what my mum and dad are doing is actively pushing back against that. And it's worth saying that despite the muscle loss and kyphosis in her back that my mum continues to work to improve, like my dad, she remains in remarkably good health in her 80s. So let me catch you up on my mum's numbers and progress, and in the next episode we'll focus on where she is now with her strength journey. She's been building really impressively, reaching 47 kilos, around 103 pounds on the deadlift, and 28 kilos, 62 pounds on her bench press. And my parents are selling their home at the moment, and they've been extremely busy. And my mum has experienced some grumbling arthritis pain in her hips just for a few days. But as a precaution, Chris has stepped her down on her deadlift, and this week she lifted 40 kilos instead. And her squats to a box wearing a weighted vest are slightly under the usual weight of 20 kilos, and she's continuing to lift around 17 or 18 kilos, 39 pounds on her overhead press. But it's particularly good to see that bench press at the moment. It's looking really solid at no less than 28 kilos. And it's just amazing to watch my mum so easily handle those kind of lifts. Now, I'm going to be honest, it's why we called it the Honest Channel after all, and tell you that my mum does feel frustrated that she still struggles to hold her back up for long periods. At 83, we're not trying to suggest it's always plain sailing physically. But when we look back to January 2025, when my mum had to use a walking cane to just make the few steps from the gate to the front door of our home, or when she couldn't stand up to wash her hair in the shower but had to lean against the side for support, or when she experienced almost constant pain in her back and was relying on painkillers to get through, that has all changed. But she wants more, and she's set her sights on walking further and further unsupported beyond the 10 minutes she's been managing recently. And that's what we will, of course, keep aiming for. We live in a time when there's so much focus on optimizing, biohacking, and tracking everything. But As my dad turns 82, his story tells us something simpler. It tells us that the fundamentals still matter most. He doesn't restrict himself excessively in what he eats, but he does eat whole foods, cooks mainly from scratch. But if he's offered a dessert on a weekend or when he's out socialising, he'll happily join in. He uses a couple of supplements, including vitamin D and the so-called anti-aging supplement NMN. We are going to link to an episode in the description where he talks more about that because people often ask, and he believes that particular supplement has helped his arthritic pain. He's also kept a fine head of hair and even improved his hair growth through microneedling with a serum called Calcium that he's been using for several years now, and a red light therapy hat too. Again, I'll include details below. But his overall approach has largely been to stick to the basics, and this is the advice he has for those looking to follow in his tracks. You talked to me once before about you were the boy that was never picked for the team at school. You weren't the sporty one at school. You weren't athletic. There were much bigger guys. Here you are. And everybody calling you a legend on the internet. And I see a lot of people saying, this is my goal, to be like your dad at 82. What advice would you give to them about how to live their life?
This concept of building up your muscle is extremely important. The way we are doing it seems to be the best way for me, and I think that anybody can do it. I certainly did not start off in life somebody who was strong in the sense of being the guy who could lift most or the guy that could run fastest. Yeah, it's remarkable. But I think that's the main issue, that people can do it. If they set their mind to it, they can do it. Mm-hmm. You don't need to have qualities of strength or whatever.
For most, frailty isn't just something that happens to us, it's something we unknowingly allow. And to stop it, we have to act now, whether we're 40, 60 or 80. The earlier we start, the more muscle and bone density we can bank. When I look at my dad now, what strikes me most isn't the weight he's lifting, it's what it represents. Because just a short time ago, things were moving in a very different direction. And now at 82, he's stronger, more capable and more confident than he has been in years. That should make us all think about what's possible for us and what we're doing today to ensure we preserve our life quality for longer. So I hope this episode reassures and inspires you that it's not too late to redefine how we age. Do let us know in the comments. And if you can think of someone else who needs a bit of encouragement to rebuild and to take action now for their future, then please do share this episode with them. For a monthly dose of healthy aging inspiration delivered straight to your inbox, make sure you sign up to our free newsletter below so you don't miss a thing. And if you'd like to lend further support to the channel and access extra content and perks from us in return, you'll find a link below to join as a member. But until next time, stay strong and thanks for joining us on the journey.